I live with my son, so you need to leave. Suddenly, my mother-in-law, whom I'm currently living with, threw those cold words at me. I thought I had always been good to my mother-in-law. I've always tried to make sure she didn't have any inconveniences, but it seems my mother-in-law never noticed. There have been times when my mother-in-law treated me poorly, and I have grown resentful. Finally, I was like, I'll gladly leave. I didn't intend to say, but I thought that was probably how I truly felt. My husband is away on a business trip. The only one who would be in trouble if I left would be my mother-in-law. The luxurious life she has been enjoying in the city is because of me. Had my mother-in-law forgotten that? With these thoughts, I have decided to leave the house. My name is Catherine, and I will be turning 38 this year. My husband and I have been married for 10 years, and we both work. We once considered having children, but the doctor told me it would be difficult for me to conceive. I was told that natural conception was nearly impossible, and we considered fertility treatments. However, after many discussions, my husband and I decided not to have children and to enjoy our lives together. Then my father-in-law got sick and passed away. My mother-in-law had bad knees, and living alone in the family home was tough. We thought about hiring a caregiver, but for safety reasons, it seemed best if she lived with us. We were planning to build a house at that time, so we designed it with a room for my mother-in-law in mind. For her convenience, given my mother-in-law's bad knees, we installed a small bathroom, kitchen, and toilet on the first floor. On the second floor, we have our own bathroom and kitchen, thinking my mother-in-law would be comfortable. Though it went over our budget, we felt it was the best decision considering my mother-in-law's comfort. It showed our consideration and kindness, but it seemed my mother-in-law didn't see it that way. I could tell from my mother-in-law's behavior since she started living with us. I never had a bad impression of her before, but recently she has become more aggressive toward me. Moreover, my mother-in-law always becomes more aggressive when my husband is not at home. My husband is in sales, and recently he has been traveling abroad more often. While he used to have day trips frequently, it's different with overseas trips. He often stays away for about a week per trip. That very day, my husband mentioned he would be on an international business trip for about a week. After sending my husband off early in the morning, I began getting ready for work. Suddenly, I heard my mother-in-law's loud voice from downstairs. "Hey, come down here right now." Wondering what the fuss was about, I quickly headed to the first floor. But everything looked normal. My mother-in-law was just sitting in the living room watching TV. I had assumed there was some sort of emergency. Then she was like, "Why are you just standing there? Hurry up and make my breakfast." I had never prepared breakfast for my mother-in-law before, as my husband and I both have full-time jobs and she always made her own. I wondered what had changed. Maybe she wasn't feeling well? I suggested she might need to see a doctor, but she replied, "I'm perfectly fine." Can't you see? Shouldn't my son's wife take care of me? I've heard other households serve a 3-course breakfast every morning. It turns out, the family she was referring to lives together just like us, but the wife is a homemaker. So she prepares meals 3 times a day. I tried to explain that my husband and I both work, so it's impossible for me to cook in the mornings or midday, but my mother-in-law just turned up the TV volume in frustration. I figured she didn't want to hear what I had to say, so I decided not to say anything more. That day, after finishing work and returning home, I found my mother-in-law waiting for dinner. I made lasagna that my mother-in-law loves, but she said, "What's this?" It's way too salty, and threw all the food I prepared into the trash. After that incident, my mother-in-law became very domineering, constantly picking on me and nitpicking everything I did. When things became unbearable, I confided in a friend who suggested it might be bullying by my mother-in-law. Upon researching online, I found numerous similar stories from other mothers-in-law. As my mother-in-law's behavior continued to worsen, I decided to have a heart-to-heart conversation with her. I took a day off from work and approached her during the day. I said, "Hey, why have you suddenly started acting so hostile? We've always lived in harmony. If I've done something wrong, let me know. But if you don't talk to me, I won't know how to make things right." However, she didn't seem interested in listening. When I patiently faced my mother-in-law, she eventually started to speak. Apparently, she had become envious after hearing about a family she had talked about some time ago. In that family, there are 2 kids, a daughter and a son, and the couple lives with the husband's parents. Their home is more spacious than ours, and she's envious because they have coffee with many guests. She mentioned that she wished to spend her retirement in such a manner. Our home isn't necessarily small. In our neighborhood, it's actually considered quite large. We have a backyard big enough for barbecue parties, and I told her we could host home parties without any issues. But she felt inferior and believed she couldn't compete, hence not inviting anyone over. Our conversation didn't conclude with any resolution. However, a few days later, an incident occurred. As I was leaving for work, a lady from across the street was staring at me. Moreover, I noticed people whispering and glancing my way elsewhere. Wondering if there was something odd about my attire or makeup, I checked but found nothing amiss. I discovered the reason for the whispers that evening. On my way home from work, one of the neighbors approached me and said, "Hey, I've heard some rumors. You know, violence isn't right." Violence? I was taken aback. Digging deeper, the rumor was that I had become violent with my mother-in-law. It was said that the confrontation took place on the day we had that discussion, and that I even told her to leave if she continued with her lavish lifestyle. I have no memory of doing such a thing, and had no intentions of ever doing so. After explaining, the lady thought for a moment and said, "If that's true, it's really not good. The whole neighborhood is buzzing with this story. I've heard that she's been approaching others, wanting to discuss it and sharing stories of your alleged violence. For a while, I was labeled in the neighborhood as the violent wife. I managed to bear it until about 5 days after my husband left on a business trip. Finally, reaching my breaking point, I felt I needed to talk to my husband first, but I couldn't muster the courage to bother him with this during his busy trip. So, I decided to first communicate my feelings to my mother-in-law. I've noticed you seem to have taken a disliking to me this past week. You're my husband's mother, and I wanted us to live comfortably together. No matter how hard I try, it seems I can't change how you feel. Perhaps it would be best if we consider living separately." My mother-in-law looked taken aback by my suggestion for a moment, but then she said, "I agree. I never really liked you from the start. Living in this fancy house on my son's dime and acting as if you've done it all. A woman who doesn't even have kids and only works has little value in my eyes." At that point, I wondered what my mother-in-law was misunderstanding, because you see, I bought this house. From the down payment of the mortgage, everything has been on me. I had explained it when we built the house, but I wonder if my mother-in-law has forgotten. Moreover, I'm the one covering the living expenses. My mother-in-law gets an allowance from my husband and spends it carelessly, but that's also coming out of my salary. Even though my husband is working hard, he's not making as much as expected, and his income is lower compared to mine. So, the agreement was that we would cover our living expenses from my income and save whatever my husband made since we don't have kids and for our future. Before we moved in together, my husband had explained this to her. He had warned her not to be wasteful. Ever since my husband left on his business trip, my mother-in-law has been watching TV infomercials every day and making phone calls. She probably ordered something. As I was thinking about all this, she started saying things like, "I'm going to live here with my son. You should leave. I'll discuss the rest with my son. If my son wants, you might even consider a divorce. So be prepared for that." At this point, I realized it was useless to argue. Once I gave up, I thought, I'll gladly leave, and quickly packed my largest suitcase. I decided to leave the house with all I could carry. Before leaving, I glanced at my mother-in-law, and she was smirking at me. She laughed aloud and said, "Oh, leaving so soon? That's not too bad of you, but maybe you could be a bit more charming?" Honestly, I don't remember doing anything to upset my mother-in-law this much. Whenever she asked for a ride, I would provide one. I tried my best to spend time with her so she wouldn't feel lonely. We haven't given her the joy of grandkids, and I work. However, that's the life choice we made as a couple, and my mother-in-law has no right to dictate that. As anger surged within me, I thought she would be the one regretting this in the end. With that thought, I left the house with my heavy luggage. When told to leave, I wondered where I would go. My childhood home is a plane ride away, and I couldn't abandon my job. Also, I didn't want to worry my parents. The first place that came to mind was my office. I run my own business, a small cafe. I employ 2 students as part-time, but primarily I manage it on my own. The cafe is in a 1-story house, with the extra space used as an office and storage. Though it's a small house, there's enough space for someone to live. I usually drove from home to the office, but living at the office would cut down the commute. Now, I won't need to cook for my mother-in-law anymore, which means more time for work. As someone passionate about my job, I got excited thinking about the extra working hours while setting up a living space in the office. I cleared out the piles of cardboard boxes and decided to sleep on the blanket I had laid out for napping. I also arranged a table and chairs to make work easier. By evening, 2 student part-timers came in for their shifts. They were surprised to see the office looking different, but once I explained the situation, they readily understood. They even said, "Let us know if you need anything. We'll help out wherever we can." At that moment, I felt grateful for hiring them. They are such kind-hearted individuals, and they have received excellent feedback from our customers. I have been checking the reviews for our cafe daily. And besides, the ambiance and food quality were highly praised by many patrons, and they also commended the service provided by the part-time staff. I had been considering giving them a raise when my husband called me, even though he was supposed to be on a business trip. I could only check the message around 9 p.m. My husband mentioned that he had returned home earlier than expected, but upon arrival he noticed that many of my belongings were missing. He confronted my mother-in-law, but she refused to reveal my whereabouts. After pressing her for about an hour, she finally explained. My husband then realized that I had left due to issues with my mother-in-law, and quickly tried to contact me. There were several missed calls, but I appreciated my husband's understanding of my situation since he didn't show up at my workplace. Feeling guilty for making him worry, I called him back. Without hesitation, my husband answered and asked what had happened. I was unsure whether to be completely honest, but my husband's persistence made me tell the truth. I briefly explained what my mother-in-law had done to me, and I could hear the anger in my husband's voice. He wanted to talk as soon as I finished work. After closing the cafe and office, I headed home. I had never seen my husband so angry before, and the thought of facing him in that state was intimidating. I arrived home around 10 p.m. and noticed that only the lights on the first floor were on. My husband and mother-in-law must have been in the living room. When I tried to unlock the door, my key didn't fit. I knocked, and my husband came out to unlock the door. As I entered the living room, I saw my mother-in-law with a sulky expression. Apparently, she had changed the locks without telling anyone after I left. My husband hadn't noticed earlier since the door was unlocked when he returned from his trip. He immediately wanted to hear the whole story from me, so I told him about the incidents of the past week. I explained how my mother-in-law had suddenly become overbearing, refused to listen during our talks, and even spread lies about me to the neighbors. Every time I confronted her, she accused me of lying. However, when my husband insisted on hearing everything, she fell silent. After I finished speaking, it was my mother-in-law's turn to speak. She claimed that I had been violent towards her and wouldn't stop even when she asked me to. She also mentioned talking to the neighbors, but the harassment from me only seemed to increase. She even went as far as saying that if the neighbors were asked, they would know all about my actions. I wondered what made my mother-in-law so confident to make such outrageous claims. The conversation seemed to be going in circles and there was no clear conclusion, so I decided to show my husband something. I had been collecting videos and evidence to prove my innocence. Audio and video footage. With just a few taps on my smartphone, I could instantly record. Over the past week, I had recorded every time my mother-in-law made snide remarks. Whenever I had the opportunity, I would prop up my phone to capture her harassing me on video. The footage showed her yelling at me to make dinner and even calling me defective for not having children. My husband was furious, his face turning bright red. On the contrary, My mother-in-law looked pale as if she had seen a ghost. In a desperate attempt to save face, she said, "This isn't right, Catherine. It's just a misunderstanding. It seems like I'm the bad one, but that's because you cut out the parts where you were being mean. In reality, you've done much worse to me." However, my husband, who had experience with video editing, wasn't convinced. If the video had been edited unnaturally, he would have noticed right away. It seemed like he completely trusted me. Just as I had hoped, he began considering living separately from my mother-in-law. Despite her vehement objections, my husband seemed firm in his decision. For the time being, I decided to stay at the office. During this period, we discussed the possibility of living separately and how to go about it if we decided to. Eventually, we reached a conclusion. We were going to send my mother-in-law to a nursing home. We had been against this idea before we moved in together. It seemed like a secure environment where she would be looked after 24/7. However, my mother-in-law had always said she didn't want to go into a facility. I thought that if she did, it would be incredibly stressful for her. But my husband revealed he had been considering this option for a while. With my mother-in-law's bad knee, and both of us working, we just couldn't give her the attention she needed. He believed that the only way to ensure her safety was for her to be in a facility. However, my mother-in-law pleaded not to be put in a facility, but my husband didn't budge. My husband isn't someone who shows his emotions much, but he truly adores me. I started dating him because of his relentless pursuit, and from the time we began our relationship to our marriage, things moved incredibly fast. After getting married, my husband was always helpful around the house and always seemed to put me first. So I kind of saw it coming when he took my side over my mother-in-law's. She apparently hadn't noticed and assumed my husband would be on her side. But when she was told she would be placed in a facility, she quickly apologized to me. However, my husband was still upset and didn't listen to anything she said. During all this, I was focused on running my cafe. Initially open for lunch, I began opening it for breakfast. I opened the cafe for breakfast and started serving alcohol in the evenings. To my surprise, the number of customers nearly doubled. I was so shocked by the huge response that I inadvertently shared the news with my mother-in-law. I said, "Thanks to you kicking me out, the cafe is doing better than ever." However, my words seemed to come off as sarcasm to my mother-in-law. I'll never forget the look on her face when I told her about the cafe's success. Her lips were tight and her eyes weren't smiling. In the end, we had my mother-in-law stay at the closest senior facility. Although the cost was higher compared to other places, it was known for its excellent services. Despite our past tensions, I never wished any ill on my mother-in-law. In fact, I am thankful for her for raising my husband to be the man he is. So when it came to choosing a facility for her, I wanted to find the best possible place. Even though I felt somewhat forced into the decision, I heard that my mother-in-law was causing a lot of trouble at the facility. Whenever I visited, I was told she had issues with other residents. The reasons for these disputes were minor things, like making eye contact or speaking too loudly. She often clashed with other residents, but fortunately, it never reached a point where they would kick her out. Instead, they ended up isolating her from the others. The staff kept me updated about my mother-in-law's situation. Initially, she was quite spirited, but about 6 months into her stay, I was told she seemed to lose her energy. She probably felt lonely without talking to others. Recently, with the help of the staff, I received a report that she is now able to converse well with other residents. However, it seems that my mother-in-law's nature hasn't changed, and due to her bad attitude, she was evicted from the facility. Although she moved to another facility, she ended up isolated and her loneliness seemed to intensify, possibly leading to dementia. It's a bit sad that she had to be separated from her son, my husband. Still, if it ensures everyone's peace, it might be for the best. Now I live in Europe with my husband. He has been traveling abroad more frequently for work and recently said he wouldn't be able to return home for about a month. Then he suggested he would like to take me abroad with him. I run a cafe and thought I couldn't possibly leave, but luckily 2 of my student workers were graduating, so I decided to close the cafe and follow my husband. I had always dreamed of running a restaurant abroad and set off for Europe. At first, the language barrier was tough, and I mostly stayed home. But after making friends in the neighborhood, my perspective changed. A friend got me a job at the local grocery store, and gradually I was able to communicate better. Eventually, I decided to open a small cafe in a corner. In a corner of a town, we had a house back in Oregon, which was still being mortgaged. We contemplated whether to sell it or not, but due to some false rumors in the neighborhood, we sold it to fund the new cafe. Thanks to the many acquaintances I had made, a lot of people visited on the opening day. The cafe was also promoted on social media as a homey cafe run by an American, and some customers even came all the way from the US. The reason I started the cafe was that I managed to obtain permanent residency in Europe. The reason my husband was traveling more was that he was getting more work opportunities abroad than in the US. His company proposed relocating him to their branch in Europe, so we ended up settling there. He eventually quit that job, but in his new job he seems to be excelling and now earns about the same as I do. When we were settled in Europe, it was difficult to figure out where to allocate our money. To our surprise, we found out we were expecting. We were told that natural conception would be difficult, but it feels like a gift from above. Raising a child will be challenging, but I believe my husband and I will manage. We can't wait to meet our baby, even though the due date is still far off. The town I live in is filled with friendly folks, and when I shared the news of my pregnancy, everyone was genuinely thrilled for me. I believe that in this environment our child will surely have a happy life. High school dropouts shouldn't live in skyscrapers. Get out, looking down on me because I only completed middle school. This mom friend is trying to kick me out of my home. But should you say that? We're the ones who are going to leave. What? I couldn't believe it. We just got married, and I never expected things to take such a turn. But you should own up to what you say, right? My name is Catherine. I am 39 years old. I live with my high school son, middle school daughter, and my husband who runs a business. I am what you would call a CEO's wife. But even so, my husband and I faced many hardships when we were young. Because I dropped out of high school, my job opportunities were limited. I often faced comments like, "You didn't even finish high school," during interviews, and it was tough. My husband, who finished high school but not college, often struggled to fit in at work. He was frequently bad-mouthed behind his back, and it used to make him cry from frustration. Despite our tough challenges, we have achieved what we have today because of our hard work. That's why I volunteer to support those who are going through hard times. I mainly volunteer at welfare facilities and places related to children. And today, as usual, while I was volunteering, a person approached me. Curious, I turned towards them. I turned towards the voice. "You clean up here around this time every day, right?" said the woman. I don't volunteer for the praise, but realizing that someone noticed my efforts made me incredibly happy. "Yes," I replied with a smile. "Seeing your elegant presence every morning lifts my spirits. Please keep up the good work." And then she left. From that day, I started chatting with this woman, Sarah. Sarah is a single mother. She works hard every day to raise her elementary school-age daughter. My ex-husband cheated on me when our daughter was only 6 months old, and he is refusing to pay child support. What a terrible ex-husband. I have kids too. I think I can offer some advice as a more experienced mom, so please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like. I just blurted that out. "You're so kind, thank you." We exchanged contact information and became friends. One day I invited Sarah over to my place. She brought her daughter along, and my middle school daughter played with her. "I always thought you had an air of elegance about you, but I never expected you to live in a penthouse." Sarah looked completely surprised. "I knew it, but the world you live in is so different from mine. Catherine, you're not only wealthy but also a beautiful-hearted woman who volunteers." Sarah seemed a bit down after saying this, so I shared my past struggles with her. Hearing this, Sarah looked genuinely surprised. "Now I suddenly feel much closer to you." Hearing Sarah's cheerful response, I felt relieved. Plus, I dropped out of high school, and my husband just graduated from high school. We've had our share of challenges. When I mentioned that, Sarah was truly astonished. "Why did you drop out of high school?" I answered Sarah's question. "My father passed away early. We were quite poor, but I had a younger sister and brother, So I started working at local stores like the grocery and liquor stores, instead of continuing high school. As I shared my past, Sarah looked astounded. Even I graduated from college. I always thought high school and college were a given. I can't believe Catherine, the wife of a CEO, didn't even finish high school, and that her husband only has a high school degree. Sarah just couldn't wrap her head around it. We're also a single-parent household. I have to make sure my child doesn't end up like Catherine. I understood what she meant. However, I thought she shouldn't have said that in front of me. Tried to change the topic by talking about our children. The conversation eventually shifted, and before we knew it, it was evening. I've been so mentally drained with work, parenting, and chores. This was a refreshing break. Sarah and her daughter left. Despite the awkward moment, I genuinely want to maintain my relationship with Sarah. As I was tidying up, my son and husband came back home. Another day comes to an end, I thought, savoring the mundane routine, when suddenly, hey, have you seen my pencil? And I can't find my new notebook either. My eldest son started making a fuss about his missing stationery. Make sure you take care of your things. While I was busy preparing dinner, I didn't really pay much attention to my son's story about losing something. Now I deeply regret not listening more carefully to my son's missing stuff story back then. One day, while I was volunteering as usual, I bumped into Sarah, who seemed to be on her way to work, and we exchanged greetings. Then Sarah said, "Could you make some time for me soon? I have something important to discuss with you." Of course, I replied and waved her off. But I couldn't help but wonder, what's this important thing she wants to discuss? I kept thinking about Sarah throughout my volunteer work that day. Then on Sarah's day off, my daughter beckoned Sarah's little girl into her room and said, "Come on, let's study over here." She really feels like a little sister to her. Sarah smiled as she watched the girls. I wonder if she's ready to become a big sister. Although Sarah's eyebrows were slightly furrowed, her overall expression was bright. Curious, I asked Sarah, "What did you mean by becoming a big sister?" Eagerly, as if she'd been waiting for the question, Sarah began. "The thing is, I'm getting remarried." "Really?" I was taken aback. I'd known she had a boyfriend, but this was unexpected. So becoming a big sister probably meant they might be expecting a child. What joyous news. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. I congratulated Sarah. Thank you, and I'd love for you to come to the wedding. She's inviting me to her wedding. That's such a sweet offer. I'd be thrilled if your husband could attend as well. By this time, our families had become close, so Sarah probably invited my husband too. I'll talk to him as soon as he gets home. That day, we were all excited talking about Sarah's upcoming wedding and her baby on the way. Then Sarah made a surprising remark. "You know, my fiancé is quite well off, and guess where we're moving? Right into this skyscraper here. This area is a bit on the rural side, but it's the only skyscraper around here. So, I'll get to see you all the time now, Sarah. Imagine that, having a friend living in the same building. How could I not be thrilled?" Yes, that's right, but Sarah's expression remained the same. "I'm sorry, I'm feeling a bit nauseous from the morning sickness. May I use your restroom?" With that, she headed to the bathroom. I've had 2 kids, so I know how rough morning sickness can be. Probably that is why she couldn't show her excitement earlier. Must be those hormones acting up. I made myself believe that Sarah's earlier lack of enthusiasm was because of pregnancy-related discomfort. There'd be no other reason for Sarah not to be joyful. I was confident in the trust Sarah had in me, but she's been in the restroom for quite a while now. I hope she's okay. Feeling concerned, I started to head towards the restroom. "Oh, I'm sorry for taking so long." As I reached for the living room doorknob, Sarah came back. "Are you all right?" I approached Sarah, noticing she looked a bit pale. "I'm sorry for worrying you. I think I'll head home now." She must have been feeling quite ill. "Thanks for sharing the wedding news, even though you're not feeling well." I said my goodbyes as I saw her off. I hope Sarah finds the happiness she deserves. I genuinely wish this from the bottom of my heart. That evening, when my husband and son got home, we discussed Sarah's upcoming wedding, and both of them conveyed their blessings. It was decided that all 4 of us would attend the wedding. On the wedding day, my son couldn't find his favorite handkerchief. He has been making a fuss about missing items lately, probably because he just finished his stressful college entrance exams and started college. I remarked with a hint of exasperation, to which my son made a displeased face. Trying to soothe him, our family hopped into the car and headed to the wedding venue. However, the traffic was terrible, and it seemed we were going to be late, even though we left an hour early. "Looks like there was a pileup," my husband murmured. I quickly called the wedding venue to notify them about our delay. We arrived way later than expected. "I can't believe we're so late." "I feel terrible for Sarah," I said with a heavy heart. We all adore Sarah, so we decided to wait for the ceremony to end. Soon enough, guests started pouring out. "Huh? Isn't that my sales director? And there's the sales manager. Why do I recognize so many faces?" Turned out, a lot of attendees were from my husband's company. What on earth is going on? My family and I were puzzled by my husband's comments. "Boss, is that you? Good to see you. I had no idea you'd be here." Upon noticing my husband, several coworkers rushed over to greet him. As he was responding, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Sarah. I immediately answered, ready to apologize. "I'm so sorry, Sarah." Before I could say more, Sarah, with a kind tone, said, "It's okay." She continued, "I'd like to see you, so I'm coming over to where you are." I've just finished changing my dress. She mentioned that she'd be coming over to us. However, my husband was busy talking to his colleagues, and our kids said they were going to explore the venue for a bit, looking for Instagrammable spots. So no one was around me. It's a shame, especially since Sarah is making the effort to come over. Just as I was pondering, a voice called out, "Sorry for the wait." Sarah arrived, looking stunning in a bright red chiffon dress. I was about to compliment her when she said, chuckling, "Now I'm the winner." "Not like you. Dropouts shouldn't live in luxury apartments." "Get out." "Excuse me? What on earth is she talking about?" I couldn't grasp what she meant right away. "I can't stand the idea of someone like you, a dropout, living in the same apartment complex as me. Leave now." Sarah suddenly snapped. Come to think of it, when I mentioned before that I didn't finish high school, Sarah had shown her disgust. But I never expected such a strong reaction. Still, I pointed out, "Is this really the place for this kind of confrontation?" "What? Why not?" She laughed sarcastically that, "It's my day. I can be upset wherever I want." I was taken aback by the sudden revelation, but I never realized Sarah was so self-centered. "You know, I've always thought it's funny how you, a dropout, do volunteer work. So hypocritical. Who would want someone like you, a dropout, to help them out?" Anyone can volunteer, but I can't understand why it's not okay to be a high school dropout. Anyone can volunteer. Education doesn't matter. I coldly said to Sarah, "Big deal." Some high school grad buys a skyscraper apartment, yet his wife is a high school dropout. Weird, right? The nearby 5-story apartment seems more fitting for you. You guys, you should move out soon. Your presence is lowering the value of that fancy apartment. Sarah's loud, mocking laughter drew the attention of the guests attending the wedding, including my husband and kids. "Why did you even invite us to your wedding if you were going to insult us this much?" I confronted Sarah with the question that had been bothering me since she started hurling insults. "I invited you here to show everyone how unintelligent you and your husband are. Just a high school graduate and his wife. Everyone attending today's wedding has a college degree. They all look down on you too." I was taken aback that Sarah had planned this entire humiliation. All we wanted was for our sincere congratulations to be acknowledged. Being late to a wedding? Typical for the out-of-touch, low-educated couple. No matter how rich you are, you shouldn't do such things. Leave your gift and go start preparing for your move. I regretted being late, but Sarah's behavior was beyond unacceptable. Get out. And not just from this wedding hall, but from that skyscraper too. Sarah's shrill voice echoed throughout the hall. Suddenly, a man in a tuxedo appeared stating, "We'll be the ones leaving." What are you talking about? The previously excited Sarah was now calm. "That's my company's CEO you're insulting? What's your problem?" Apparently, many of the wedding attendees were employees from my husband's company, because the groom was one of his employees. "You work at the high school graduate CEO's company?" A shocked Sarah received a nod from the groom. No way, I can't believe it. Sarah was trembling. Come to think of it, Sarah knew my husband was a CEO but didn't know which company he led. Why didn't you tell me anything? If I had known from the beginning, I would have kept buttering them up. Darn it, my plans ruined. Sarah threw a tantrum. Because the bride was in such a state, there was a buzz among the attendees. Suddenly, there was a sharp snap, and a dull sound echoed throughout the already resonant hallway of the wedding venue. The groom had slapped Sarah on the cheek. Sarah, caught off guard, couldn't utter a word. Hey, you disrespect the boss's family and then throw a fit like this? Get a grip. The groom was furious. Yeah, that's right. Even if you're the bride, you can't insult the boss and his family. Yeah, he's right. The husband's co-workers unanimously scolded Sarah. Why? What did I do? What's wrong with mocking a dropout? All of you are just as dumb as the stupid family. Sarah spat out these words and stormed off. Hey! Lead up! The groom chased after Sarah. I followed closely behind, but soon the groom lost sight of her and looked around frantically. I'm truly sorry. The groom, out of breath, bowed his head in apology. You've done nothing wrong. Together with my husband, we tried to calm the groom down. We continued our search for Sarah. In her bright red dress and being pregnant, she couldn't have gone far. We were certain we'd find her. As we searched, we heard a groaning sound coming from a restroom. Sarah? I called out, and the noise stopped. What? Just a high school dropout after all. It seemed Sarah hadn't learned her lesson. But there's no point in getting more upset now. Listen, truly believe that education is essential. Both my husband and I struggled because of our educational backgrounds. But if you don't have the education, you just need to work harder. When I said that, Sarah came out of the bathroom. Work hard? If you don't have an education, you're gonna work hard. So you're saying that everything will turn out fine in life? Sarah had makeup streaks running down her cheeks. Yes, in many ways, that was the case for my husband and me. And another thing, the willingness to help each other. That's crucial too. When you're in trouble, don't hesitate to talk to someone. When I gently said that, Sarah bit her lip and looked down. I mean, yes, I looked down on you for only completing a middle school education, but the real reason I wanted you to leave that luxury apartment was something else. Huh? Tears filling her eyes, Sarah began to speak haltingly. Actually, from your home, I've been stealing various things. Shockingly, Sarah had been taking things from our house. Things like pencils and toilet paper, even small items like handkerchiefs. Every time she visited, she'd steal something. Apparently, she always had a knack for theft, and it seemed her real reason for divorce was also related to her stealing habits. At first, I approached you, Catherine, because I thought you were an elegant and lovely woman. But when I found out about your education, I got jealous. I thought you were richer than me, so it's okay to steal just a bit. Had my words hit her nerve? Even without being asked, Sarah revealed her true feelings. Even though I was stealing, you and your husband were kind to me. I was filled with guilt. That's why I truly believe that education is essential. That's why I truly didn't want you to find out. When I decided to live in that luxury apartment, I wished you lived further away. So that's why. Stealing is inexcusable, as is lying and then hurling insults. I really had no intention of forgiving Sarah. But I've been through hard times myself. I've been doing volunteer work for years, wanting to help others, so I can tell when someone's really struggling. Sarah, you're struggling right now, aren't you? If you could stop your thieving habits, you would, right? I leaned in and asked Sarah, and she burst into tears. Despite everything she had done, as someone who does volunteer work, I couldn't abandon Sarah. I might seem foolish, but merely blaming someone won't help anyone. Suddenly, Sarah muttered something. Huh? When I asked her to repeat, she yelled. I said, shut up. That's why you seem so hypocritical. Just when I thought Sarah had knocked me down, a sharp pain shot through my face. I'm so freaking mad. Normally, when someone realizes their stuff's been stolen, they get mad, right? But what's with you? You're so damn creepy. Sarah cried out in tears. Sarah's tears dropped onto my face. This is all messed up because of you. My wedding, my life. If I'd never met someone like you. If I hadn't met a dropout like you. Sarah continued her rage without trying to stop herself. Stop it. Finally, I managed to grab both of Sarah's wrists and stop her. Enough. Always blaming others like that. I get it, being pregnant can mess up your hormone balance and make you easily upset or teary-eyed. But this is way over the top. I finally lost my patience. That's why things come back to bite you, because you hurt others without a second thought. Don't you get it yet? But Sarah seemed like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the right word. Suddenly, security personnel entered the room. It seems they had already heard about Sarah's outburst. She was quickly escorted out. And to my surprise, the police were waiting for Sarah. Sarah was arrested. I didn't think Sarah would be like this. Let's divorce. Just as Sarah was about to be taken away in the police car, the groom, now her ex-husband, said that to her. Damn it, this is the worst. You've got to be kidding me. Rejected by her groom, Sarah's desolate scream echoed. A few days later, it seemed Sarah's detention was suspended due to her pregnancy. By the way, their daughter is now staying. With Sarah's parents, sometimes the daughter comes to visit and chats about various things. I don't even think of her as my mother. Despite being just a child, she seems to have a strong aversion to Sarah. Even Sarah seems to be deeply affected, reportedly sinking into severe depression. Moreover, Sarah's parents are also disappointed in her and are considering cutting ties. Sarah is on the brink of being abandoned by her own family. I wish I could be as strong as Catherine. After giving birth and getting bailed out, Sarah was determined to get proper counseling. However, it's hard to trust someone who lies so effortlessly. As for me, I'm sorry. I really am. I deeply apologize to my son for the incident when he was so upset that he had lost something. I had no idea that Sarah had stolen it, and felt remorseful for brushing it off. I told him I didn't just lose it. Luckily, it was returned. My son is still holding a grudge. Who would have thought Sarah was like that? My daughter was taken aback, as she was close with Sarah's daughter, a high school graduate and CEO. I've got a long way to go. My husband is trying to see the bright side for some reason. Our family of 4 will likely face challenges again, but we want to come together and overcome them. We don't need the old lady. You can deal with the dead weight, Alicia, my sister-in-law, said with a smug smile. She probably doesn't care about Grandma, as long as she gets the house. My brother also grinned, looking at Grandma and me. This isn't a place where Grandma can live her final days happily. That's why I declared it's okay. I'll be with Grandma. My name is Amy Smith. I turned 50 this year. Currently, I live with my husband. We have 2 kids, but they moved out long ago after becoming adults. There were tough times juggling work and parenting when the kids were little, but looking back, it feels surprisingly short-lived. What fills the emptiness in my heart are my job, my husband, and Grandma. Currently, I work with my husband at a high-end restaurant. I run the place while my husband Jake is the head chef. The reason I'm the owner is that I majored in business management in college and was interested in the restaurant business. At first, I wanted to provide my own dishes, but I quickly gave up. It seems like I didn't have a knack for cooking. Back in college, a posh hotel nearby was hiring kitchen helpers. Luckily, I got the job. But apparently, even as a part-timer, my cooking skills didn't meet professional standards. My knife skills were so bad that they quickly moved me to serving. Even though it was a lowly position, I wanted to gain some experience in the culinary world. It was my first setback. I ran straight to Grandma for comfort. After comforting me for a bit, Grandma looked me in the eyes and said, "Amy, I know you have dreams, but there isn't just one path. Some might be detours, but no road is useless, so keep your chin up and give it a shot." Encouraged by Grandma's strong words, I replied, "Thanks, Grandma. I'm gonna give it my best shot." Thanks to Grandma's words, I managed to keep going and continued my serving job throughout college. Grandma was always kind and always stood by my side. For someone like me, who lost both parents, she is the most dependable figure in my life. And then I met Jake. Jake was training as a chef at the same posh hotel where I worked part-time. Even though he was in training, he had been working there for about 5 years and was trusted with some parts of the cooking. One day, probably having heard from other staff, Jake found out about my interest in cooking. He said, "If you'd like, I can teach you. I'm still in training, so I can only show you the basics." "Really? Thank you so much," I replied with a big smile. From then on, we started visiting each other's homes and began our cooking lessons. Since we couldn't use the hotel kitchen, we practiced in our own kitchens. As I learned from him, Jake and I got closer and eventually started dating. After 3 years of dating, we got married. We happily became a married couple. Even after our marriage, Jake continued his training at the high-end hotel. I took a job at a startup that managed multiple restaurants to learn about business management. There, I learned the ropes of running a business. It was a series of challenges, far more intricate than my college classes. I made mistakes countless times and got reprimanded by my bosses. However, as I continued to fail, I gradually accumulated successful experiences. In the end, using the startup company's program, I opened an upscale restaurant. Even though I was an employee, I successfully realized my dream of managing a restaurant. Of course, I chose Jake as the head chef. Jake had just finished his training, so he decided to leave his job at the luxury hotel without any regrets. And that's how Jake and I combined our strengths to run an upscale restaurant. Work is going smoothly, but my personal life has been put on the back burner. I'm so busy that the time I can spend with my grandmother has drastically decreased since my student days. For someone like me who has lost both parents, my grandmother is the most dependable figure in my life. My dependable grandmother now lives with my brother and his wife. My brother Bob, who is 3 years older than me, is a bit quirky. When I told him about my plans to become an entrepreneur using the startup company's program, he completely shot down the idea, saying, "Why are you doing something so high risk? Having a regular job is the most stable option. Besides, being a salaried manager doesn't pay much and it's not even worth it." I protested against Bob's blunt words, but he seemed unwilling to change his stance and continued to argue. "Listen, Amy, stability is key in this world. Yet you live so recklessly. Your husband is the same, right? Managing a business together is too risky. If the restaurant fails, you both go down." I was taken aback by his harsh words. "What?" I exclaimed, but Bob remained firm in his opinion. "Just remember, if things go south and you end up in debt, don't come running to me. I'm only looking out for Alicia." I was really shocked by this outburst. In my case, I have the support of my employer, so I'm not incurring any personal debt. But before I could retaliate, my sister-in-law, Alicia, chimed in. "You and your husband really live on the edge, don't you, Amy? But if things go bad, please don't rely on us." Hearing this, I resolved never to ask them for help, no matter how tough things got. The reason my grandmother ended up in the care of this couple was due to their unilateral decision and high-handedness. One day, when I visited my grandmother's house where she lived alone, Alicia answered the doorbell and blurted out, "Why are you here, Amy?" Surprised to see Alicia there, I asked, "Why are you here, Alicia?" "This is my grandmother's house." Realizing the situation, Alicia replied, "I've been living here since the other day to take care of Bob's grandmother." "Got a problem with that?" I explained that I was just visiting my grandmother, and Alicia sarcastically said, "Again? You need to let go of your grandmother." Still, I was worried about my grandmother's well-being. But this was her house. However, getting into an argument with Alicia, who was living with my grandmother, wasn't a good idea. So I would say, "Sorry, I just wanted to see her for a bit," and kept visiting my grandmother. Every time I visited, my grandmother seemed happy to see me, but over time she seemed to be losing her energy, and I was worried. Then one day, as usual, I found her collapsed at the entrance. "Grandma, what happened?" I shouted at my grandmother, but there was no response. In a panic, I called an ambulance and rushed to the hospital with my unconscious grandmother. She only has 6 months left. The doctor's prognosis was devastating. My beloved grandmother was seriously ill. Apparently, the hospital she was brought to was where her primary doctor practiced. According to the doctor, there was nothing more the hospital could do. They could only provide palliative care. And since my grandmother wished to be treated at home, they respected that decision. While I was hearing this devastating news from the doctor, a nurse informed me that my grandmother had woken up. "Grandma!" As I entered the hospital room, my grandmother looked in my direction. "Amy, I'm so sorry. I should have told you earlier. Grandma murmured weakly. My eyes began to blur with tears. Is it true? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Do Alicia and Bob know? Tears streaming down my face, I asked her, and she slowly shook her head in response. No one knows. I was planning to just quietly fade away all by myself. Seeing Grandma like this saddened me deeply. At the same time, I felt that something needed to be done. Let's tell Alicia and Bob about it. Before I knew it, I had made this strong suggestion to her. Grandma seemed taken aback by my sudden proposal. Surely, with a situation as dire as this, even those troublemakers, my brother and his wife, would change their attitudes. At least that's what I believed. 3 days later, Grandma was discharged from the hospital. But it wasn't a positive kind of discharge. There's simply nothing more the hospital could do for her. Supporting her, I took Grandma back to her house. When we entered her house, which she had handed me the keys to, both Bob and Alicia were there, probably because it was Sunday. Where have you been all this time? Anyway, it's been kinda nice without the old lady around. Alicia was talking with laughter. Bob grinned and agreed, saying, indeed, it's relaxing not having that nagging old lady around. Our grandma was visibly in a rough shape. Yet, I couldn't believe they would make such an inappropriate joke in front of her. At her. I got so angry that I snapped back at them. Both of you cut it out? Grandma is sick and has only 6 months to live. She can barely stand now. How can you say such things? When I shouted, they both seemed taken aback for a moment. But soon Bob, with a cynical laugh, muttered, "You're kidding, right?" Alicia didn't seem to believe it either. She smirked and looked at me. Huh. So I told them with a stern face, sadly, it's true. If you think it's a lie, why don't you ask Grandma's primary physician? Grandma, with her weak voice, also added, I really do have only 6 months. I imagine I won't be able to do many things soon. Upon hearing this, Alicia's face twisted. What? So I have to take care of her? I don't want to deal with that. I just came to this house to save on rent. I absolutely don't want to care for her. Old lady, just leave now. Alicia waved her hand, shooing Grandma away. Tears formed in Grandma's eyes. We don't need you, old lady. Amy will take care of you, Alicia said smugly. Probably, as long as she gets the house, she doesn't care about Grandma. Bob was also smirking as he watched me and Grandma. He seemed to have no feelings for our Grandma. She won't be happy in this place, I declared. It's okay, Grandma. I'll be by your side, I quickly countered. This is Grandma's house, and she wishes to spend her last moments here. However, Alicia stood her ground. Sorry, Amy. I've always known that Bob and Alicia have bad attitudes, but I never thought it would come to this. Grandma apologized repeatedly. She seemed on the verge of tears, her shoulders trembling. Seeing her like that hurt me. But Alicia looked at us with pure disdain. Can you leave now? You're in the way. Also, don't come to us for help later, even if you regret it. We won't help you, not even with a cent. She sighed deeply, looking very annoyed. Really? I definitely won't be taking care of Grandma. Don't expect us to look after her, Bob said, grimacing. It's Alicia and Bob who have imposed themselves on Grandma's home and been a burden. Yet now that they know about her limited time left, they want to throw her out. I've come to truly despise Bob and Alicia. So I responded for the last time. I won't have anything to do with Bob or Alicia anymore. I'm gonna cut ties with you as family. If you regret it later, that's on you. It seemed Grandma had also been bottling up her feelings about them as she whispered, I won't see you two ever again. Goodbye. If we cut ties, it'll be easier when you end up in a lot of debt, Bob said with a chuckle. Exactly, Alicia added. If Amy ends up drowning in debt, it has nothing to do with us since we've cut ties. So, good luck with taking care of the frail old lady and dealing with your debt. Ignoring Alicia's sarcastic wave, Grandma and I left the house. I brought Grandma to my home. As she stepped out of the taxi, she remarked, What a lovely house. In fact, our house is more than twice the size of Grandma's. Thanks to the company's policy, Jake and I, who run an upscale restaurant, receive not only a regular salary, but also a special bonus. We get a cashback from the restaurant's profits. It's a unique system of our company. This system, which is like running an independent business, aims to motivate employees. Indeed, thanks to this policy, Jake and I receive a good income from the company with low risk. Our take-home pay is much higher than Bob's, who is just a regular worker. As I thought about that, the front door opened. Hello, Jake greeted me with a smile. I had informed Jake via email beforehand, and he was waiting at home to welcome our grandmother. Jake has been so busy with work that he hasn't had the chance to visit, so today is a long-awaited reunion with our grandmother. Our grandmother looks extremely happy to see Jake. He quickly ushered her into the living room and served some tea. Sipping her tea, grandmother seemed to relax a bit. For the past 6 months, I feel like I can finally live happily. I felt so out of place in that house, grandmother muttered quietly. According to her, Alicia and her family had been neglecting grandmother all along. They wouldn't even cook her portion of the meals, and sometimes Alicia even took grandma's pension as part of the household expenses. That's awful, I blurted out. Jake looked upset as well. After a moment of heavy silence, Jake, with determination, stood up and said, I'm gonna do something about this. We should give them a taste of their own medicine. I can't stand being pushed around like this. I'd regret not standing up for grandmother. I got up as well and said, we'll make sure they regret it. And so we took a stand. A few days after we took action, my phone was flooded with calls from Bob's number. Even when ignored, the calls kept coming. Finally, I answered yes. Alicia, sounding frantic, began questioning me. I figured she was using Bob's phone. What are you talking about? I have no idea. I knew exactly what she was getting at, but I played dumb. Alicia, losing patience, pressed on. That's about Grandma's house. Suddenly, a real estate agent is demanding we vacate. Did you have something to do with this? It's our house now. Mind your own business. Alicia sounded cornered and irritated. Ignoring her outburst, I calmly responded, well, Grandma just sold her house. What's the problem? Just because Alicia and her family lived there, they assumed ownership, but the house was still in Grandmother's name. I don't get why they felt entitled to it, Alicia, sounding even more flustered, shot back. Why did she sell it? We're living there. Is this some sort of revenge? Just because you're struggling doesn't mean you have to be envious. She didn't seem to believe the house had been sold. This was going nowhere, so I decided to lay out the facts for Alicia. It's true. The sale is already finalized. The property now belongs to the realtor. If you continue to stay there, it'll be trespassing. Alicia sounded completely lost for words. Turns out, after Jake and I decided to act, he went to a real estate agency with grandmother's power of attorney. They quickly moved through the selling process. By the way, when we explained the situation to Grandma, she was completely on board and signed the papers right away. I definitely don't want to hand the house over to Bob and his family, Grandmother had said, her face turning red with anger, which showed just how upset she was. As I explained the situation, Alicia began to panic on the other end. So suddenly, where are we supposed to live now? We even gave up our previous apartment, and with that she broke down over the phone. Actually, according to what my grandma told me, Alicia, despite being a stay-at-home mom, was quite the big spender. She'd casually buy designer handbags and never miss her monthly spa treatments. Bob is just an office worker and definitely not earning a high salary. Because of that, it seemed like Alicia and him were struggling to make ends meet. Alicia had pre-existing debts, and their finances were a real mess. Under normal circumstances, that would be grounds for divorce. But Bob is too smitten with Alicia, probably because she's a beauty. So, on Bob's suggestion to save on rent, they both moved into my grandmother's house. But to be honest, I couldn't care less about their situation. I don't know why you came to me. Why don't you just stay? Why don't you just stay in a motel or something until you find a new place? Oh wait, you're broke, right? I said sarcastically to Alicia. She seemed to think I had no idea about their financial struggles. Suddenly she looked panicked and whispered, "How did you know?" Bob, perhaps not wanting this to be known, just kept quiet. Then my grandmother chimed in. I told her. She continued, "Amy and Jake's home is really comfortable. It's spacious and clean, with all the latest appliances. It's worlds apart from where you lived before." And she chuckled. Bob immediately bit back. What the hell? How come you guys have money? Weren't you drowning in debt? His pride seemed hurt, and he was shouting in disbelief. I kindly informed him, aside from our salaries, we also get a percentage of the profits. So I believe we earn significantly more than you. Plus, we're a two-income household. We probably make double what you do. Easy. No way. Bob seemed stunned on the other end of the line. You always said being a salaried worker was the right path. Turns out we're living a much wealthier life than you. You really had tunnel vision, didn't you? I couldn't help but laugh. I could hear Bob growling over the phone. Upon realizing our affluence, Alicia started to butter me up. Then can we stay at your place, Amy? If your house is that big, there should be room for us, right? What a ridiculous proposal. I promptly declined. Absolutely not. Didn't you specifically ask us not to rely on you? We've cut ties with you guys, so don't come crawling back now. Find your own way. With that, I hung up. They've tried calling multiple times since, but I just ignore them. I never want to have anything to do with people like Bob and Alicia again. I hope they realize and regret their actions. Eventually, I heard they were caught shoplifting. The police contacted me, and I got to know about it. Apparently, Alicia's debt had snowballed to a point where Bob's salary alone couldn't cover it. Alicia even seemed to be taking her grandmother's pension. Debt collectors started showing up at Bob's workplace, which led to his debts being exposed and him getting fired. With no income, repaying their debts became even harder. Bob and Alicia seemed to have been struggling even for daily meals. As a result, they apparently shoplifted sandwiches and bread from a convenience store, and the store's staff reported them, leading to their arrest. Seems they've hit rock bottom. According to the police, they wanted me to be their guarantor. I messed up. I'm sorry, just look out for us. Bob pleaded, but it's too little too late. Even Alicia, who usually had no regrets, seemed genuinely remorseful. Please help us? I'll apologize for everything. Just give us a hand. I heard Alicia has been pleading this way through the police. But this whole mess started because of Alicia's reckless spending. Bob being oblivious was also a problem. They brought this upon themselves. And after what they did to my dear grandmother, I can never forgive them. They can keep struggling for all I care. 3 months have passed since then. My grandmother is still alive and well, which brings me so much joy. I took a caregiving leave and have been staying by her side. There's a real advantage to having a flexible job. Even though she has her tough moments, on her good days we can walk around the garden together. These times are the most enjoyable and therapeutic for me. Grandma, your birthday's coming up. Is there anything you'd like to eat? I asked her. She responded, maybe a cake baked by you, Amy? Even now, she tries to make me feel better about my subpar cooking skills, and it really tugs at my heartstrings. I still want to be with my grandma, and I feel I haven't done enough for her. Every day, I want to make even just a little more memories with her. And I plan to be by her side for as long as she's with us. It wasn't necessarily you from the start. What? You think just because we're married, you're loved? I never imagined my husband would cheat on me, and then have the audacity to say such a thing. Overwhelmed with shock, I called my mother, only to receive an unexpected response. Well, isn't that a good thing? At that moment, I had no clue what she thought was good, but it seemed my mother had her own thoughts on the matter. It was time to bring justice to a husband who showed no remorse for cheating, and to a sister who stole another's spouse. My name is Sarah Taylor. I'm currently 35 and work as a pharmacist at a general hospital. Since graduating from college, I've been dedicated to my job, living a life far from leisure or romance. My days were simple, devoid of any drama, until one day when I received a message from a club member I was briefly affiliated with in college. It seems there was a man he wanted to introduce me to. I learned that this man worked in an all-male environment and had 0 opportunities to meet women. They asked if they could share my contact information. Initially puzzled, I figured it would be rude to decline without reason. After agreeing to share my contact information, the man reached out to me immediately. Hello, I'm David Taylor. Sorry for the sudden approach, but I've heard you're a wonderful lady, so I wanted to chat. I hope you don't mind me sharing your contact info. Our conversations via email and phone were lively, and soon David and I started dating. My first impression of David was of a man who took charge. He was meticulous in planning our dates and always put ladies first. It felt as if I was being treated like a princess, and my daily life seemed to be filled with roses. I promised to make you happy. Please be with me. Let's get married. Yes, I'd love to. So, I got married at 33, but since our wedding, I began to notice David changing. Having lived alone for a long time, David had established his own routines. Of course, I had my own habits from living solo, but as a couple, I tried to make adjustments to ensure we both lived harmoniously. Often hearing David complain about his tiring work, I took it upon myself to handle chores like cooking, cleaning, and laundry. However, this might have backfired. Before I knew it, David seemed to have adopted the mindset that household chores weren't his responsibility. I was going to take a bath, but what's this? There's trash in the drain. I'm sorry, I'm cooking right now and can't step away. Would you mind cleaning it up? What? Why do I have to clean right after coming home from work? With a click of his tongue, David began preparing to go out somewhere. Hey, what's up? Dinner will be ready soon. Why are you ordering me around? It's really off-putting. Ordering me? I didn't. Besides, where are you going this late? Anywhere I want. Are you gonna boss me around? He slammed the door and seemed to have left. Sometimes I might be lacking in household chores, or if I ask for small favors, he becomes grumpy right away. He acts like a rebellious teenager. He wasn't like this before we got married. With these thoughts, I've been spending more time alone. Lately, I've been holding back from saying unnecessary things to David. I don't say much, don't ask for anything, and keep my reactions neutral. I've been wondering if this is what married life is supposed to be like. Around that time, I noticed David coming home particularly late. Maybe he's been busy at work, working weekends and unexpected late shifts. I hope he doesn't get sick. You've been coming home late recently? Busy at work? Are you trying to boss me around again? That's so annoying. It's work, okay? What? He responded in an irritated manner and we stopped talking after that. But I know. One of my acquaintances is a junior coworker of David, and she told me some concerning things. She mentioned David reducing his overtime for family time, and that she's seen him arm in arm with someone, disappearing into the night multiple times. I don't remember ever walking arm in arm with David, but something does come to mind. I have a twin sister, and even as adults, people sometimes mistake us. Our faces look identical, but my sister, who's vibrant with makeup and always dresses elegantly, is quite charming. If anyone mistook someone for me, it would probably be her. Hey David, my friend said she saw you last Wednesday night around 7 p.m. Oh? Really? Around 7 p.m.? What were you doing then? I don't remember, maybe I was at the convenience store? As he said this, not taking his eyes off his phone, I noticed his fingers trembling. I decided to be direct. She said you were walking arm in arm with me. But I was working late that day. What are you trying to say? Spit it out. Have you been seeing my sister Scarlett behind my back? So what's your point? When I confronted David about cheating, he started saying things he never expected. Suddenly, he stood up from the sofa and glared at me. You know, it wasn't necessarily about you in the first place. What? You think just because we're married means you're loved? What? I mean, when we were dating, didn't we get married because we loved each other? No way. Someone plain like you don't exactly stand out when you're beside me. Don't stand out? So, you think it's okay to cheat with my sister? While fiddling with his smartphone, David replied with a sigh. Look, I want to become an influencer someday. And looking good on camera matters, right? If I were to choose someone, it would be Scarlett. What? Influencer? What are you talking about? Besides, you're a pharmacist, so even if I mess up, we won't have any financial issues. The unexpected comments kept coming, and I was having a hard time processing everything. So, are you saying our marriage is just a safety net? Kinda feels that way, doesn't it? So you didn't marry me because you loved me? Don't flatter yourself too much. Who do you think would fall for a plain Jane like you? David gave a mocking smile, looking right at me. I've always thought this, but you don't really make an effort with your makeup or clothes. You just don't care, do you? Listening to this nonsense, I raised my voice. Then why don't you divorce me and marry Scarlett? You don't even understand how I feel. I don't care. I'm just with you because I want to achieve my dreams and have a good life. You should be thankful. What? How can you expect me to be grateful in this situation? David, with a smug look on his face, waved his hand dismissively and then returned his gaze to his smartphone. If I hadn't confessed to you, you'd probably still be single, right? Just stop making fun of me. I want a divorce right now. No way, I'm not going to divorce you. Plus, I don't know what our company and your parents would say. And of course, don't tell anyone about this. I was shaking with anger. After everything, you have the audacity to tell me not to speak out? Well, I doubt anyone would believe you anyway. My mind went blank with shock. I was all mixed up and couldn't think straight, but suddenly decided to call my mother, even though it was early in the morning. When I got married, she heard David's greetings and knew him well enough. I thought she would understand me with a brief talk. Why are you calling so early? And are you crying? My mother asked. No, not really. Just tell me what happened, she prompted. I explained everything that had happened. After listening to the story about David and Scarlett, she exclaimed loudly, "Well, that's good, isn't it?" I was puzzled, not understanding what she found good about the situation. Just leave David alone for now. You can deal with this situation bit by bit, my mother advised. Taking her advice, I decided to let David stew for a while. A few nights later, I met my mother at a cafe. Is it okay for you to be out this late? Isn't Scarlett at home? I asked. Scarlett said she's on a date. She mentioned something about a new boyfriend recently, but after hearing about Sarah, it made sense. So she's been telling you she's going on dates when she goes out? Yeah, typical Scarlett stuff. I've felt since high school that she's been a bit loose with her relationships. But I never thought it would lead to this. My mother sighed, drinking her iced tea in one gulp. We need to keep a close eye on those two, she continued, fiddling with her smartphone. After a while, she looked up with a mischievous grin. Next time, bring David over to our place. I've already texted him. She showed me the message on her phone. It mentioned needing help with shopping and the need for some muscle as she was planning to buy something heavy. Guys like him act all nice in public. Just ask for some help and you'll see his true colors. I see, I replied. On the agreed day, I headed to my parents' house with David. On the way, it seemed like David suddenly remembered something and started speaking. Hey, I think you know this, but if you tell your parents about that incident, I won't let it slide. Even if you do, they probably won't believe it anyway. You gotta be kidding, he said. Why on earth would I say that? What's in it for me? While discussing this, they arrived at my parents' house. David, it's been a while. I'm sorry for bothering you on your day off. It really helps that you came. No worries, I just wanted to be of assistance to you. My mother greeted David with a bright smile. Suddenly, as if she remembered something, she made a suggestion. Oh right, Scarlett got the day off from work too. She mentioned wanting to go shopping together. Would that be okay with you, David? Of course. Well, shall we head to the mall? The shopping center was about a 30-minute drive from my parents' house. Before we shop, there's a place I'd like to go. Without hesitation, my mother briskly moved through the mall. We ended up at a jewelry shop, hosting a special Valentine's Day corner. There was a flyer about a special gift for couples who wrote their wishes for love and a chance to win a grand prize through a lottery. I often see campaigns giving candies to kids who write their wishes, but I didn't know they have ones for adults too. It says couples and married folks can participate. Why not give it a shot, Sarah and David? You might get lucky. Seeing that poster, David began to back away hesitantly. Well, I'm not really into these seasonal promotions. Valentine's is all about love between couples. It's something couples and spouses should do together. While emphasizing spouses, my mother chuckled mischievously. I always knew my mother wore her heart on her sleeve, and she was definitely up to something. Realizing this, I decided to play along. Come on, let's give it a try. There's a lottery where 3 couples can win a luxury resort hotel stay. That resort hotel? You two never really had a proper wedding, so why not take some wedding photos there? I'm not much for photos and we might not even win. We haven't won yet, but we might. Excuse me, ma'am. Before David could decline again, I called over a store employee and expressed their interest in participating in the Valentine's event. However, the employee's face turned sour upon seeing them. The employee stated that they couldn't participate in the event. Huh? The flyer said couples and spouses can join. I'm sorry, but we don't allow second-time participants. Second time? This is our first time ever visiting this mall. Suddenly, I turned around and saw two people fidgeting. I couldn't believe it. And when I looked back at my mother, she was asking the store clerk something. What do all participants in this promotion receive as a gift? It's this charm. It's a special design just for this year. Saying this, the clerk brought out the charm for us to see. The clerk brought out a shooting star design charm that looked familiar. It was the same charm I had glimpsed on David's bag. I remember spotting it casually when I was observing a pouch I didn't recognize he owned. Could this be the shooting star on David's pouch? Hearing this, my mother immediately sprang into action. That's odd. Scarlett had something similar recently. Excuse me for a sec. As my mother said this, she reached into Scarlett's bag and pulled out a wallet. Just as I thought, it's attached right here. I had a feeling. Mom, stop it. Don't go through someone's wallet. You're not a thief. David, who was watching the mother-daughter squabble, seemed even more nervous than before, bouncing his knee. Look at him jittering. Maybe he's panicking because he's been caught on a date with someone else? But David snapped back loudly at the front of the store. What the hell? Just because of one accessory you're gonna make a big deal out of it? This sucks. I'm the one who's upset here. My mother smirked mischievously, putting a hand on David's shoulder. Let me get this straight, David. You left your wife, Sarah, to have a date as a couple with her twin sister, Scarlett? No, you've got it all wrong, my mother-in-law. I just got this charm from someone nearby when we went to the bar. They said it was a charm for a happy marriage. Don't even try to lie like that at this moment. It's obvious. What I realized later was that these shooting star charms given away at the event had serial numbers engraved on them. The serial numbers matched, and this became the conclusive evidence that gave away to my mother. We need to have a proper talk. If you have anything to say it at home. When we got home and all four of us gathered in the living room, the atmosphere became tense, like a wake. I didn't even know about such an event. Mom, where did you hear about it? I got a tip from a colleague at work. Apparently it's become a sort of power spot among those who cheat. They say if you can keep those matching items without getting caught, you're destined to be together. While discussing this, my mother addressed David and Scarlett. So are you gonna explain in detail? David, you're married to Sarah but cheating on her. Besides, you're cheating with Sarah's twin sister Scarlett. Is that right? Well, yeah, something like that. I can't believe he's laughing it up at a time like this. But they're sisters, so I'm still your precious family, right? I mean, they're from the same family, so why bring up such an unpleasant topic? You hurt your wife and prayed at that place. Does that mean you're serious about it? Well, something like that. Scarlett is so feminine and lovely, she knows how to step back and let a man lead. Suddenly, David became talkative and began to spill the beans on why he cheated. For me, I was thinking I wanted to be with Scarlett from now on. Really? My mother just listened quietly to David's outrageous story without uttering a word. I couldn't bear just sitting and listening any longer when suddenly, Scarlett leaned in closer. We are serious. I mean, Sarah got married first, but he truly loves me. He always tells me that. If you're that serious, then why not just get a divorce or remarry or whatever you want right now? David, taking my mother's words as a sign of permission, started to get carried away. So, I appreciate your understanding in the long run, my mother-in-law. And Sarah, I'm going to remarry Scarlett, so this is it between me and you. It's not over yet. There are things that need to be settled, right? David seemed taken aback by my mother's words for a moment, but quickly resumed his smug grin. You're saying not to end it, but didn't you just forgive me for divorcing Sarah and being with Scarlett? But still, it's true, I've borrowed money from Sarah within a certain range. But since I'm still part of the family after the divorce, don't you think returning it would be just silly and crass? Immediately after hearing David's words, Mother turned to me and asked, That's a valid point, isn't it? Hold on a second. I can't accept this. divorcing without debt repayment or an apology, and then remarrying. I've talked to a lawyer, one of my acquaintances. I showed them a loan book, which I had prepared just in case following the advice of a lawyer. You're going to pay $40,000 to Sarah? She's earning her own money, isn't that enough? Do you want more? You're such a greedy person. As the two argued loudly, my mother made a proposal. You're starting a new life together, and you don't want to give a huge sum like $40,000 to Sarah who can earn her own money, right? That's right. Recovering debt from one's own family is a bad joke. Divorce is not a happy occasion, but Scarlett getting married is something to celebrate. I'll cover David's debt up to $30,000 for Scarlett. Mom, you're the best. I'm so happy, but I have one condition. I want you to think about this. The document my mother presented read Waiver of Inheritance Agreement. Inheritance waiver? So, if Scarlett agrees to that, you'll take care of the debt for me, right? I don't really get it, but this means Mom's gonna help us with our wedding funds, right? Then we've got to agree with that. Facing the unbelievable notion of my mother paying my husband's debt, I felt like crying on the spot. On the spot, there must be some hidden agenda my mother has. However, instead of helping me, who has been hurt by an affair and subsequent divorce, she is siding with my twin sister and cleaning up the mess. After ensuring that all the necessary procedures had been properly understood, my mother said we could end this matter. When we reconvened after our lawyer told us the application was accepted, my mother muttered as if talking to herself. Now that Scarlett has renounced her inheritance, it will belong to Sarah, I guess. Inheritance? Why bring it up now? Although David seemed utterly confused with countless questions floating in his head, my mother continued her soliloquy. The commercial building downtown, the apartment in the next town, the convenience store beside it, and this house too. I can't wait to see how much they will be worth in the future. Hearing this, David and Scarlett abruptly stood up, causing a loud noise. This is the first I have heard of this. You tricked us. If that's the case, I can help manage the properties or something. What are you blabbering about? Do you think I would trust someone who can easily betray others and then act all innocent? Why didn't you tell us? We lived together for so long, and you never mentioned it. It's from my uncle. He's been a landowner for a long time, but he doesn't have any children. So there's no one to inherit it. That's why it came to me. What's it to you anyway? Well, you could at least give us one of the apartments as a wedding gift, a love nest. Save your dreams for bedtime. This is all written in the documents. Neither of you read it, did you? Maybe you two are a match in some weird way. My mother chuckled and stored the documents in a nearby safe. In the end, the money that my mother paid could be seen as some sort of palimony. You have been a real pain, always relying on me saying it's easier to stay at home. But living alone is scary, and strangers come around. You bring it upon yourself. You're always getting into some kind of trouble and bringing it home. It's been a real hassle. According to my mother, Scarlett had been reckless with her relationships even before adulthood, causing constant trouble. At that time, I was focused solely on my studies and started living alone when I went to college. So I wasn't very familiar with how my mother and Scarlett lived. But from what my mother said and how she said it, it was easy to imagine the difficulties. There was a time when 3 men claiming to have been duped by Scarlett stormed our home. And when she dated a married man, his wife came shouting at our doorstep. It's been hell. Isn't that the same as an affair? Just like what she's doing now. I thought she had finally settled down, and then I heard about an affair with Sarah's husband. After my divorce was finalized, David and Scarlett filed their marriage papers and became a couple. But what really kept them going was the thrill of their secret relationship. Ever since David divorced me and started living together with Scarlett, aspects of each other that they didn't want to see or know about began to emerge. Every time it appeared to be, the relationship between them was getting more sour. Furthermore, it became widely known at David's workplace that he had divorced due to an affair. He's been treated like a hot potato because rumors say he made a move on his wife's sister. A mutual friend who works at the same office as David told me that he's going to be transferred to a sales office in Nebraska soon. Well, he's essentially been demoted, hasn't he? But you know how he is, he might not even realize why he's been demoted. True, that's quite possible. One day, I was having tea at a cafe with my mother while I was taking a half-day off to use up some paid leave. It's a local favorite and a nice spot to chat, but I didn't expect to run into the last person I wanted to see there. Sarah, I'm gonna be transferred. Oh, really? But you brought this on yourself, right? It's a sales office that's a half-day away by train. Isn't our manager harsh? They won't even cover my moving expenses. Well, that figures. Why the heck not? It's a company order. They should at least cover the moving costs. I've been working hard for the company. He seemed totally oblivious to the fact that he was being demoted because of his own actions. What's more, the nerve of him trying to squeeze relocation costs from the company. Hey, can you lend me some money for the moving expenses? Or I can take it as a promotion bonus or something. You talk without realizing the absurdity of what you're saying. Besides, I don't need you anymore. Please get out of my sight. Ever since I divorced David, my days have been like a breath of fresh air. Recently, I thought about trying something new. A comic I casually posted on social media turned out to be a huge hit. I never thought a comic about my sister taking away my husband, mixed with some fiction, would be read by so many people. I feel blessed to be able to take on new challenges, encouraged by warm messages from fans. Maybe by sharing it in the form of a comic and having it read by many, some of my unpleasant memories are being processed. I hope to continue living fulfilling days both in my work and with my comics. At the airport, getting ready for our honeymoon, I pulled out the ticket holder from my bag. Following my husband's instructions, that's when it happened. My husband snatched the plane ticket from my hand and threw these words at me. "You're not worth it. I should have gone with someone else." He then ran towards another woman. Watching him, a secret smile crept onto my lips, and I took out my phone. Well, time to go as planned. My name is Michelle Anderson. Ever since I graduated from college, I've been working at a trading company in New York. I am now 30 years old. My husband John is also 30 years old and is a journalist registered with a publishing house. We met in the same college seminar. Back then, I wasn't particularly ambitious about my future job, but John, with his dreams in pursuit of job opportunities, seemed radiant. He always said he wanted to be a reporter chasing stories for newspapers or magazines. He definitely had a spark in him. Seeing each other often in the same seminar, our conversations grew more frequent over the course of 2 years. By the time graduation approached, I didn't want to part ways. So under his proactive approach, we started dating. We lived together for 3 years after graduation. Then at 27, we made it official. However, we didn't have a wedding ceremony, reception, or even a honeymoon. Both our parents weren't thrilled about it, but while it was easy for me to get extended time off, John, who always prioritized his work, especially during incidents, couldn't do the same. What about life's milestones? What if something happens to one of your family members all of a sudden? Would you say the same? Even when I said that, he replied, "What are you talking about? Funerals are one thing, but weddings are a matter of personal choice. The stories I'm chasing right now can't wait." I couldn't argue with that. After all, John's job was relentless around the clock. I remember how ecstatic he was the year before we got married, as he finally got assigned to the editorial department of the weekly magazine he had always wanted to work for. Now he's busier than ever, working day and night. Well, not just now. Even before we lived together, his apartment was a mess, and he only came home to sleep. One of the reasons we started living together was that I got tired of cleaning up his place every weekend. I was the one who chose and signed the lease for our new apartment. Except for sharing his preferences for location, rent, and size, he didn't do much else. We split the rent and living expenses, but he sometimes forgot to pitch in. I took care of the cleaning and laundry. Even though we lived together, we rarely saw each other. The main reason for our official union was my desire to hold on to him, even if it was just a formality. For John, perhaps a wedding ceremony seemed unnecessary, but for me, even if it was just symbolic, it was important. Symbolic, I wanted a commemoration, a milestone. At the very least, I suggested we should take some photos and go on a short honeymoon nearby. But all I got in return was, "Why just take pictures? If you want to go on a trip, why not go with your friends? I don't have time for that. Many of my college friends who are in the same seminar would say, that's not right. But those who knew about his job often replied, it can't be helped. 3 years have passed. We're now 30, even though I want to discuss having children. John and I often have opposite schedules, making it hard to find the right moment. All I do is rush between work and household chores every day. I started wondering, why did we even get married? But then one day, John said this out of the blue. Hey Michelle, didn't you mention wanting to go on a honeymoon before? Yeah, but aren't you too busy? Nah, looks like I might get some decent time off. We can go if you want. Really? I'll set the duration, you choose the rest. His tone did bother me, but I still noted down the dates he mentioned. A week's time, and it's going to be summer. So I thought, maybe a cooler place would be good, so I considered going to Alaska. I went to the bookstore, picked up a few travel guides, marked places I wanted to visit, and showed them to John. Hey, can you look at this? I want to go here. Before I could ask him where he wanted to go, he dismissed me with a wave of his hand. Hey, you choose. I'm fine with anything. Oh, okay, something felt off to me then. Maybe it's unfair to expect much from John with his busy daily life. But this is supposed to be our honeymoon. Our very first milestone. I wanted to discuss and decide the destinations with him. Is it wrong for me to hope for that? Even though we've lived together for years, our lives barely intersect. When was the last time we had a meal together? I realized that we hardly ever spoke to each other. Even when I initiate a conversation, he often responds with phrases like, do whatever you want, and I might let you handle it, if you insist. Come to think of it, that's how he's been about chores as well. I remember John, back in college, saying something like this to everyone. In today's age, couples should both earn and equally share household chores. Splitting chores is just fair. You sure you can handle that? I can cook at least. I was quite impressed at the time. He wasn't wrong. Although he mostly eats out, occasionally he seems to cook for himself. I often find dishes I didn't use in the sink, but all other chores are on me. I always end up cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, taking out the trash, everything. Now, John rarely comes home at the same time I do. Once in a blue moon, we get to have dinner together, and it's a relief. But even then, he's constantly glancing at his phone on the table. Once dinner's over, he quickly moves to the living room, seemingly messaging someone on social media. All the while I'm busy cleaning up. One day, slightly irritated by his indifference, I commented, "You seem awfully busy texting." "Well, unlike you, I have work contacts to keep up with," he replied. He probably wasn't wrong. By the way, he often leaves his smartphone unattended, like when he's taking a bath or napping on the living room couch. It was by pure chance that I peeked into it. He was messaging a woman. "Who is this person?" I asked. At that moment, I shoved my smartphone screen in front of a groggy, just awakened John. The name on the screen read Anna Johnson. Multiple messages from John's side lined up, reading things like, "How have you been? And are you okay since then?" "Though?" I asked. "Oh, she's related to the case I'm currently working on," John explained. "Is there a problem?" I asked, feeling slightly annoyed. "You're texting someone related to the case every single day?" "Well, if I have questions, I've got to show some sincerity, right?" John defended himself. "But doesn't she seem annoyed by it?" I asked. "You have a problem with how I do my job?" John retorted, "I couldn't really argue when he brought up work." "But decide soon where we're going," John said, changing the subject. "I might not be back until the last minute because of the case I'm investigating. Pack our bags, will you?" "Yes, that had just happened recently," I replied. And finally, the day of our trip arrived. John, who said he might not make it home in time, surprisingly, woke up early and in high spirits. "Then I'm gonna make breakfast," he said, placing a plate of toast, bacon and eggs, and a salad in front of me. I became suspicious when he also set down a pot of coffee, as it was so unlike him. "What's with that look?" I asked. "When I decide to do something, I do it," John replied. Sure, it was just store-bought potato salad, undercooked bacon, and instant soup, but there was no need to make it seem so special. I kept those thoughts to myself and quietly ate. "Here, your luggage," John said, handing me my bags. "Thanks. Looks like you packed it well. Aren't you gonna check inside?" I asked. I'll check later, John replied. If you say so. We headed straight for the airport. By the way, our destination written on the tickets was Alaska, I said. We had plans to travel around different parts of the state. We took the tram to the domestic terminal and headed for the boarding gate. As we were approaching, John suddenly stopped in his tracks. Hey, have your boarding pass ready? He asked. I can get it out quickly. As I began to pull out the ticket holder, he snatched it from my hand. He snatched the tickets from me, saying, "What a waste to travel with you. I should go with someone else." With that, he ran towards the boarding gate. There was a woman standing ahead. That's Anna Johnson. He had a picture on his smartphone. That's definitely her. I caught a glimpse of it, smirked discreetly, and took out my own smartphone. Well, shall we head out as planned? A few hours later, I was at the terminal building of an airport in Alaska. I headed straight for the domestic exit, right up to the famous pastry shop in the dessert corner on the second floor. I knew John and Anna were at the eat-in space there. I confidently walked in and approached the two of them who were enjoying an airport-exclusive sundae. Found ya? John, who had been gazing dreamily at Anna, suddenly paled. A bit of ice cream still on the corner of his mouth, looking at me as if he'd seen a ghost. Wait, why are you here, Michelle? Anna jumped up and threw herself at me. Michelle, I've been so scared. I gently rubbed her trembling back while giving John a stern look. What do you mean, why am I here? Do you know how many flights from different airlines land there? I just took the earliest one. Are you really a journalist? Not even knowing something so basic? Else, exactly. How can you not even realize that, John? What kind of journalist are you? From behind me, a deep male voice slowly approached, making John look even more tense. Why? Why is the editor here? Let's not make a scene here. Let's step outside. The man called editor was Mr. Long, the chief editor of my husband's department. When we got married, he and his wife had invited us to dinner as a celebration. At that time, we exchanged numbers just in case. As the charismatic Mr. Long grabbed John's arm, John shivered. Anna, walking beside me, intertwined her arm with mine, while John looked on, completely baffled. Every time he tried to get closer to Anna, Mr. Long would firmly hold back John's hand. We pretended not to notice as John clicked his tongue in annoyance. It's less crowded over here. We headed towards a special room on the third floor we had reserved earlier. A man already inside stood up and waved at us. Hey, over here. John's expression turned to shock, and he stopped in his tracks. Come on, why are you stopping? Wait, Michelle, why is my dad here? Well, you left me behind, so I just invited everyone. Why not make it a family trip? That's right. It's your fault for thinking you could go on a honeymoon with another woman. Mr. Long, she nodded. Sorry for the wait, mother and father-in-law. We managed to capture John. Capture? Exactly. A man who thinks of going on a honeymoon with another woman should be captured, don't you think? Even you, Mom. And you used Michelle's money for all this, didn't you? Father-in-law? Yes, it wasn't just the in-laws. My parents were there too. And another man in a suit with glasses. So is this the young lady in question? Who are you? Sorry for the late introduction. I am. He handed a business card to John. A lawyer? Why? In fact, I received a request from both Michelle and Anna here. John said Michelle did? Wait, more importantly, Anna? Why on earth? John reached out to her as he said this. However, his hand missed as Anna dodged it. Stop it, Anna. I'm sorry, Anna. I managed to get her out here with your help, but it seems that was my limit. No, I'm sorry. If this settles everything, you've been following Anna around for a while, haven't you? You're saying I've been stalking her? Is that not the case? It's not. I spoke to Anna about the incident that happened the other day. So, after that was over, you kept in touch even though the article was done? For stories like this, you're supposed to keep in touch with the people involved. Mr. Long slapped John on the head from above. I apologize, Miss Johnson. I told him not to publish any more articles about the incident you were involved in. Yes, I thought so. Look at the messages this man has been sending me. The lawyer handed out printouts of the messages to everyone. What is this? Thank you for your cooperation. Would you like to grab dinner sometime? And you kept inviting her long after she declined. I mean, it's just common courtesy. I was drawn to your brave attitude. What's this about? She truly was brave. Despite the incident, she tried so hard to recover. John, the voice of John's father-in-law boomed. What on earth are you saying? Drawn to her? Miss Johnson, I won't ask about what happened, but I know you were hurt. Yet it seems this fool kept reminding you of it when you were trying to forget. Anna nodded with tears in her eyes. I only cooperated because he promised to write. He promised to write properly about the incident, yet he kept coming up with reasons to ask me out afterward. And the volume of messages, too. He knows where I live. That's right. There's also this. The lawyer handed out several pictures. They showed John with a camera next to a window of a 2-story apartment complex. It's the apartment I live in. Did you plan this? Hearing that, Anna shivered again. I've made up my mind. I'm gonna report him for stalking. What are you talking about? Anna began to speak as if a dam had broken. Every single day he asks, what are you doing? Can we meet tomorrow? Even though he's heard about the incident, he persists even after I tell him there's nothing more to discuss. But you replied to my texts, didn't you? Who do you think is enjoying this conversation? Exactly. Thanks for today. How have you been? Yeah. You know what's good when you're tired? A massage. I'll come over and give you one sometime. I'm busy now. Stuff like that. And what's with the creepy... Are you in the bath? Messages? I chuckled as I flipped through the thick printout. Yes, I really appreciate everything Michelle did. She advised me to keep records of everything. Oh, come on. It must have been scary, right? To deal with someone spouting nonsense like that. It was terrifying. Anna shivered. How could you think from those messages that I was into you? It was just plain creepy. But about our trip, it was a final blow for you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bothered with this terrifying plan. Terrifying plan? You still don't get it? I sighed deeply. That was my name on it, right? You probably realized it was about the airline ticket. Oh, right. It was... What about it? Mr. Long spoke in a hushed tone. You know, if that's found, it's a crime. Exactly. And if someone gets caught, it won't be you. It's her, he gasped. He truly seemed unaware. Mr. Long put his head in his hands. I can't believe how stupid my subordinate has been. You two shut up. You're going to use this to fly to the Philippines. With that, Mr. Long shoved the ticket in John's face. Why? There are various matters to investigate over there now. You can refuse if you want, but if you do, Mr. Long turned to Anna. Yes, if you decide to stay in the country, I'll report you to the police for stalking. I get it, but I don't have my luggage or my passport. Ah, the passport. Here. It was my turn to hand it over to him. Oh, right. There's something important. Sign this before you go. I handed him the divorce papers with my signature. Divorce papers? Are you abandoning me too? Oh, what are you saying to the wife who went to such lengths to prevent you from getting a criminal record? I'm the one who runs our home. I laughed dramatically, but then I changed my expression. Do you have any idea how much of a proper married life we had in that house? We hardly ever saw each other. Both working full-time, and yet all the housework falls on me. Plus, you haven't been contributing to our shared living expenses or rent recently. Really? I get paid just fine from my job. I know. I've looked into what you've been spending it on. Like those high-end cameras at this apartment. Just sign it? Seeing my fury, his face turned pale as a ghost. He shakily signed the papers and handed them back. All right, the rest is up to you. Sorry for everything, said Mr. Long as he escorted John towards the international flight counter. We chose to settle on the 3rd floor instead of the spacious lounge on the 2nd floor. Why? Because the 3rd floor of this airport is where the international terminal is located. The plan was to easily get him on a flight to Manila. As for what happens to him next, that's none of our business. After that, I moved from the condo I had been living in to a small apartment meant for living alone. The number of rooms decreased, and there's nothing unrelated to me. No more buying groceries for someone who I don't know when they'll be back. How easy house chores are when it's just for myself. I realized just how much unnecessary struggle I've been through while living with John. The moving expenses were covered by my father-in-law. He also settled the living expenses and rent John forgot to pay. My in-laws, lamenting that they raised their son wrong, were such kind folks. About a month later, I got a call from Mr. Long. Apparently, John got caught up in some trouble overseas and got arrested. Was it some kind of crime? I really don't know. Our editorial department didn't ask him to get involved in any crimes or anything. Just told him to send daily updates on the situation over there. Well, I've heard various stories like he got deceived or got addicted to gambling. Told him if he could get a big scoop, we might let him return. Seems like John got too ambitious and ruined himself, Mr. Long indirectly implied to me. Since then, I haven't heard any rumors of him coming back. Michelle, over here. At the cafe we had arranged to meet, Anna signaled me. I quickly approached her table. Sorry for the wait. Are you all set? Absolutely. How about you, Michelle? Look, I showed her the fan merchandise for the concert we were going to. We shared a cheerful smile, had a quick coffee, and then headed for the venue. While I was discussing John's issue, I discovered that Anna and I were both fans of the same musician, and we hit it off. We had promised to attend a concert together once everything was settled. Today was the long-awaited day. After getting married, I had forgotten about such joys amidst our conflicting schedules. But now, I can finally spend time just for myself and with friends who share the same hobby. I'm truly glad I made that decision back then.